We are talking about homemade fruit leather today and 7 of the common problems that you might encounter. Everything from brittle fruit leather that cracks when you go to roll it, to uneven drying and so-so flavor. We'll also talk about equipment. Do you need silicone mats and trays to make fruit leather? We'll answer the question of whether making fruit leather is even worth your time. Mold and insects? Yep, we're going to talk about those too. And we'll talk about storage conditions so that you can really optimize the shelf life of your homemade fruit leather. I want to help you make your next batch of fruit leather be your best yet. Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm here to help you create your slice of country living wherever you live. Welcome to Chocolate Box Cottage, the sweet spot between old-fashioned skills like gardening and cooking from scratch and modern conveniences like a food dehydrator that make life easier. Today we're talking about the 7 common problems that you might encounter in making homemade fruit leather. 1, we'll talk about equipment. Do you need special mats and trays to make fruit leather? 2, uneven drying. 3, brittle fruit leather that cracks when you roll it. 4, flavor that's too tart or bland. 5, we'll talk about ways to maximize your efforts so that it is worth your while to actually make fruit leather. 6, a mold and spoilage due to insects. And 7, shelf life. We're going to talk about how to maximize your shelf life so that your fruit leather lasts a long time. I've been making fruit leather for decades, and I suppose I've made all the mistakes. So I want to help you avoid those mistakes so that your fruit leather is beautiful and delicious. Now I want to let you know right up front that if you are having a specific problem with your fruit leather, you can check the timestamps below and jump right on over to that section of the video that addresses your specific problem. And if you find a solution that helps you, would you please give the video a like and leave a comment? Let's talk about equipment first. First of all, I am assuming that you're using a food dehydrator. It is possible to make fruit leather with an oven, but we're not going to go into that today. So you can use any style of food dehydrator to make fruit leather. Doesn't matter the size or shape. Do you need silicone mats and trays to make fruit leather? Most dehydrators come with between 1 to 4 sheets, especially for fruit leather, but perhaps you'd like to fill your dehydrator. Do you need to buy those extra items? While they're nice to have, silicone mats and trays are not necessary for making fruit leather. You can use parchment paper. I suggest unbleached parchment paper. It's available in grocery stores next to the plastic wrap and aluminum foil. Just simply pull it out and trace as many squares as you need to with a pencil, and then cut it with a scissors. Scissors is usually easier than trying to use the box cutter. And the same goes for a round dehydrator. Just trace around the shape and cut out the center as well as the edge, and voila, you've got paper backing for as many sheets of fruit leather as you want to make. Uneven drying. You check on your fruit leather partway through the drying process and you notice that portions of it are still really thick and sticky, usually in the middle, while the edges are starting to dry out already. Remember, the edges are exposed to more heat and air. To counteract this, you can do 3 things. The first thing you can do is use an offset spatula to spread the fruit puree. An offset spatula is normally used to frost cakes, so you'll find this in the cake decorating aisle at your craft store or online. A large one like this is great for square trays. For smaller round trays or trays that have sides on them, an angled pie server works really well to spread the puree. Second thing you can do is spread the puree about 1/4 inch thick, and that is just a little over 1/2 centimeter. This tool right here is going to help you do this. You will be amazed. It's just right for the job. It will be so much easier to spread that fruit puree evenly with the right tool. Third, rotate the trays midway through the drying process. If you're drying a full load, which is what I recommend after you've made a couple of small batches for practice, swap the tray's location in the dehydrator. Take a center tray out, rotate it around, set it on top, and then replace it with one that was either on the top or the bottom of the dehydrator. Go through all the trays and make sure they're all rotated around, and you will be amazed at how much of a difference this makes for even drying. Fruit leather sheets aren't all going to finish at the same time, so be home and be available to check on them occasionally and remove individual sheets as they dry. Crispy, brittle, over-dried fruit leather. You go to roll it up and you hear that telltale crackle that tells you it's going to break, not roll. Is there anything you can do? Over-dried fruit leather can almost always be rescued with a spray bottle of plain water. What? Water? Yes. In drying your fruit leather too long, you removed too much water. So let's add some back in. What you'll need to do is, with your dehydrator turned off, is just simply mist the sheet of fruit leather lightly and evenly, and then let it rest a few minutes. Come back and see if it will roll up. If not, mist it again and let it rest another few minutes. It might take several tries, like this one did. I left this in the dehydrator much too long, and when I went to roll it up, it just wanted to fall apart. Well, I did just what I described to you. I misted it and let it rest, and now it's nice and pliable and ready to roll up. Now, let's talk about what can happen if over-drying isn't the problem and your fruit leather is brittle, because this does happen. There are other reasons that your fruit leather might be turning brittle. One is using dead ripe or overripe fruit. Remember, as fruit ripens, it releases more juice, and that means a thinner puree. A thinner puree is going to turn brittle when it's dried. You can still use that fruit, but you'll want to cut it with something that can help give it more body. Applesauce is a great one for that. You can decide how much applesauce it needs so that you achieve a fruit smoothie type of a consistency in your puree. It may take all the way up to half applesauce and half fruit to get there. You can use bananas. I recommend they maybe not be quite this ripe because the flavor can get strong the riper they are. But if, hey, bananas are your favorite fruit, that might be a plus. And your other option is to use pectin. And this is instant fruit pectin for making jam, so it does not need to be cooked. About a half a teaspoon added per 2 cups of fruit puree will give your fruit leather that lovely jammy consistency that kids love about store-bought fruit leather. I like using the instant because it does not require cooking. If you're fine with that, you can use regular pectin and make a cooked fruit leather. And my friend Carolyn over at Homesteading Family does that beautiful. I'll be sure to link her video for you so you can go watch that as well. And I have to tell you, my kids would ferret out any fruit leather in the pantry or anywhere in the house. Once in a while, I would make a batch of chocolate banana fruit leather for me. It was my treat and I wasn't keen to share it. So I would put it in a jar and label it barf berry and put it in the back of the freezer. Worked like a charm. Another strategy for dealing with brittle fruit leather is to accept it. That's right, just accept it. My friend Margaret intentionally dried her fruit leather all the way dry, crispy dry. She breaks it into shards and puts it in a jar, and she says it's like candy. She actually prefers it that way. Thanks for sharing your picture with us, Margaret, and for that change in perspective. These little pieces could also be used in recipes. Now there's a fun thing to brainstorm. Flavor. The best tip I can give you about achieving really great flavor in your fruit leather is to combine fruits. So rather than making a fruit leather that's all apples or all plums, put the two together and you'll have that nice balance of sweet from the apples and tart from the plums, because plums usually have that tart skin on the outside that kind of makes your mouth pucker. Put the two together and it's great. I have a great list of flavor combinations for you at my website, chocolateboxcottage.tv. So be sure to check out that. I'll put it in the link below. It's a free printable for you. The second tip I can give you is to taste the puree before you spread it out. You should have a nice thick fruit smoothie texture, and it should have a nice bright flavor. Remember that as your fruit leather dries, moisture evaporates and the flavor concentrates. So it will intensify the flavor, which is usually a very welcome change. It will be more sweet and more tart, both. Now, if your fruit puree falls on the side of too sour or too tart, you can correct that by adding some applesauce or mashed bananas to it. They are a very welcome source of sweet flavor. You can also add a little bit of honey or maple syrup or even a little sugar. I won't tell. And if your problem is the opposite and it is just kind of bland, then you can add some citrus fruit to perk it up. Lemon juice, fresh lemon juice is great. So is any citrus fruit really. And another option is ascorbic acid. You can find this in the vitamin aisle at many grocery stores. It's just pure crystalline vitamin C powder is all it is. The next problem that I'd like to address is too much work. Does the yield justify the amount of effort that you're putting in? I feel this. Most recipes are written for just 1 or 2 sheets of fruit leather at a time, and that just hardly seems worthwhile. Well, there's an easy fix to that. Simply make more fruit leather. After an experimental small batch or two to get the hang of the process, I highly encourage you to fill your dehydrator whenever possible. So if you have a 5-tray dehydrator, make 5 trays. If it's a 9-tray dehydrator, make 9 trays. And I have a couple of tips to help you with this. The first is to go watch my video tutorial on fruit leather. It is full of tips and wisdom to help you make premium quality fruit leather with fewer mistakes and less waste than what I did when I was learning. And the second is to know that square dehydrator sheets hold 2 cups of fruit puree and round ones hold 1.5 cups. Knowing this measurement helps you figure out how much fruit puree to make so that you can fill your dehydrator every time. Speaking of ROI, return on investment, I encourage you to visit a store in your area and check the cost of fruit leather. You might be surprised how much it's worth. And do a little comparison between your homemade and store-bought. And make sure you compare apples to apples. And by that I mean if a little piece of store-bought fruit leather weighs 1 ounce and costs $1.37 and your quarter sheet weighs 2 ounces, double it. Do you use organic fruit to make your fruit leather? Compare it to organic fruit leather. Do you have any ideas, any guesses on how much this fruit leather might be worth? I'm really curious what you think. Put your guesses in the comments. You might be surprised to find out that the fruit that's dropping from your backyard fruit trees and the strawberries that are going unpicked are actually worth quite a bit of money. Speaking of strawberries, my friend Mary over at Mary's Nest has a delightful video on making homemade strawberry vinegar from the tops that you cut off of strawberries. I'll be sure to link that for you. You'll never want to throw away strawberry tops again after that. So tell me, have you put your guess in the comments yet? What do you think 1 jar of fruit leather is worth? This is 1 full load in the Excalibur dehydrator, 9 trays, which I cut into 4 servings each, so it's 36 servings. $100. That's right. $100 per jar. Isn't that shocking? So don't let anybody tell you that home food preservation is a waste of time. It's not. This fruit leather is premium quality, all fruit, and I can feel good about serving it to my family, and so can you. It makes wonderful gifts too, and it doesn't take much to doll it up. Just put it in a jar and attach a little tag. These cute little tags are made by a lady named Jess who has a shop on Etsy, and I'll be sure to link that for you, but you might be able to make something. Add some twine or a square of fabric, tie that on to make it giftable, and you've got a very worthy gift. Damage due to mold and insects. These two are sad, but completely preventable. Mold occurs if the food is not completely dry and is stored at warm room temperature, or if it's dried too slowly. There's too much moisture. Fruit leather should be flexible and pliable, and it should feel dry to the touch. There shouldn't be any moist patches or really sticky areas. Once your fruit leather has been removed from the dehydrator, you can prevent mold by conditioning it. And what this looks like is simply taking all the pieces of fruit leather and placing them in a jar with a tight-fitting lid, like this. So take this jar and put it in a dark cupboard for about a week and check on it every day. If you notice any condensation forming inside the jar, that means there's too much moisture present. You'll want to take the pieces out of the jar, put them back in the dehydrator, and let them finish drying. Give them about 15 to 30 minutes. And it's okay if they're rolled up. You don't need to change the shape. It's fine to just put them in there the way they are and let them finish drying. After they've had their 15 to 30 minutes, let them cool completely, then put them back in the jar with the lid and repeat the conditioning process. So put it back in a dark cupboard and take a look at it every day for several days to a week and make sure there's no moisture forming inside the jar. After that, you can remove the jar to your pantry where it'll stay at cool room temperature in very good condition for about a year. Now let's talk about insects. Have you ever opened a jar of dried fruit leather or dried fruit and to a flutter of mothy wings? Well, I have, and it's no fun. I'm not proud to admit it, but it can happen. And the reason this happens is because food sat in a turned off dehydrator. Yep. You see, heat and moving air deter insects. Anytime a dehydrator is sitting turned off with food in it is an open invitation to insects. Try not to let this happen. But let's say it does happen. Is there anything you can do to circumvent an insect problem? As a matter of fact, there is. Let's say you have a dehydrator that has a timer and the timer went off, the unit shut off, and you didn't realize it, or you just plain forgot about it and the food's been sitting there for more than a couple of hours. What you'll want to do is pasteurize it. So take the servings of fruit leather, put them in a jar like this with a tight-fitting lid, and put them in the freezer for 2 to 3 days. This will kill any potential insect eggs. How to store fruit leather for best quality and storage life. Okay, so you've made a batch of fruit leather. It tastes great, everybody loves it, and you want it to last a long, long time. What are your options as far as storage? You have several actually. You can store it for about a year in a glass container with a tight-fitting lid like this in a cupboard or pantry. It lasts about a year. It holds its flavor and quality quite nicely. I do recommend glass jars over plastic containers because glass seems to hold the flavor for about twice as long as plastic. The National Center for Home Food Preservation did a study and said that fruit leather stored at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 16 degrees Celsius, lasts in very good quality for about a year. At 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 27 Celsius, the storage life was cut to 6 months. You also can store fruit leather in the fridge or freezer if you have the space. My friend Cindy Williams did an informal test on this and let me know what her results were. Her kids are grown in and out of the house now, so she said she's not going through the fruit leather as quickly as they used to when the kids were home. It's just her and her husband now. So what she does is she stores the bulk of her fruit leather in the freezer and in the fridge, and she brings out about a week's supply at a time to keep in the pantry. She said that that works really well. And she also last night discovered a cache of forgotten plum applesauce fruit leather in her freezer that was 6 years old. I asked her to taste it and let me know how it was. She did. She said it was a little crumbly and the flavor wasn't quite as bright, but it was still very good after 6 years in the freezer. So if you have the space, that is a good option. Thank you for sharing your tips, Cindy. That was really awesome. And fruit leather doesn't go bad per se if it's been longer than a year. The color, the flavor, the nutrients will start to fade, but it's still okay to eat it. Well, I hope this video was helpful to you. I hope you come back to it and refer to it whenever you have questions about making fruit leather. And if you have tips to share from your experience, I hope you'll drop those in the comments below to help others. Thank you so much. Blessings to you, and I'll see you next time.